Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Kyser Lough. I'm a third-year PhD student in the School of Journalism here at UT. And today I'm going to talk to you about my project with Karen McIntyre from Virginia Commonwealth University on solutions journalism. So solutions journalism is a style of reporting that basically simply defined is rigorous reporting on responses to social problems. And all it is just asking reporters to, instead of reporting on just what's going wrong in a community, look to what people are doing about it. So it's not necessarily advocating for solutions or even coming up with solutions, but instead it's just saying, what are people doing about it? You have your who, what, when, where, why, and solutions journalism is the what's next. Why do we have solutions journalism? Why is that something that people are trying to push? Well, because of a lot of this. You have your headlines about how it's always bad news. We're always talking about doom and gloom, how much news is bad, how much do we exaggerate the negativity. And so solutions journalism comes to try and combat that a little bit, to show what good is being done in the community. And that's not to say that, again, you're promoting that. You're presenting these solutions of what people are doing, but you're doing it in the styles of normal journalism. So you're presenting it critically. So on the left, we have an example of a story that is looking to address issues of public health in a community. And so they go and they find where people are conducting free exercise classes in schools to help with accessibility to these types of programs. But on the other side, we have a solutions journalism story that is taking a solution to gerrymandering and presenting it critically and looking at where the flaws might be. But the point is, you're talking about what's being done. And presenting that. So a lot of academic research into solutions journalism as of right now has focused primarily on effects on the audience. The Center for Media Engagement here at UT has done a lot of this work initially. Karen and I have done some additional work along with some other scholars. And so we know that people that read stories that add on some solutions journalism typically report more favorable attitudes, more knowledge about the topic, self-efficacy, behavioral intention to either get involved or in some cases to donate, and just generally positive feelings. So they engage more, they're more interested, they spend more time with these stories. But what we haven't really looked at yet is on the newsroom side of things. So how do journalists think about solutions journalism? How do they position it within the whole field of journalism, and how does it carried out in their practice? So that's what we decided to get at, looking at journalist perceptions of solutions journalism and helping to position that and helping to see how it fits into their routines and habits. And the way we chose to go about this is using the hierarchy of influences model. So this model is a way to look at the many different factors that influence media coverage. And you'll see it starts very broadly with social systems. It goes down into social institutions and ideology. It moves closer into the media organizations themselves, then down to your routine practices and all the way down to the individual level. All these different things that influence how media is shaped. And so we took that model and we asked journalists about solutions journalism. We did in-depth interviews with journalists that were connected to the Solutions Journalism Network. That's an advocacy group out of New York, and we reached out to them because we wanted to find journalists who were aware of solutions journalism. And they have a wonderful list of people who have attended trainings, of people who currently do it, but mostly just people who are aware of it, whether they practice it or not. And so we reached out to those journalists. We did a long series of interviews, transcribed them, did a couple of deep reads, pulled out some themes, and that's what I want to talk about. Our findings, we had a lot. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. The rest you can read about in our paper, which is online. But we looked at it from the institutional level, and we found that journalists position this really closely to investigative reporting, which sounds interesting, and we'll get to that in a second. There's still objectivity concerns, which I'm sure nobody is surprised. At the organizational level, we found that management is the thing above all that either helps or hinders the progress of solutions journalism. And then finally, at the individual and routine level, looking at habits of thought, we found that really the thing that changes when somebody does solutions journalism is their habits of thought and not necessarily the process of reporting itself. So first, investigative journalism. How is this connected to solutions journalism? Well, a lot of our respondents called solutions journalism the next step. So if investigative journalism is the watchdog, solutions journalism is the guide dog, and it tells you what's next. After you finish your 3-part investigative series where you expose a big social problem in the community, you then tack on the solutions piece and go into, well, what is the community doing about it? What's happening next? What is happening? And so the quote that really summed it up best from one of our interviews was, I think solutions journalism is that final extra step where you say, here's something that could work here. But even note there, you're saying, here's something that could work here. That's a form of advocacy. And we saw that while a lot of journalists liked the idea of solutions journalism, there was still some imbalance in how objective they saw it. You have civic journalism and advocacy journalism and peace journalism, and solutions journalism is supposed to operate outside of that, where you really add in that objective level. And while we found that the journalists said that solutions journalism engages the audience more, it helps restore media trust because you're going into more than just reporting the bad news, they still struggled with the objectivity level of it. And so we have 2 really good balancing quotes on this. On the very objective side, we have one journalist talking about how it's not a story about me and what I think, it's a story about what's happening on the ground. While meanwhile, on the very other side, we had someone who completely believes this is an advocacy style of reporting. You might as well advocate for something, right? Looking for a solution is being an activist. So there's still a lot of conversation about the objectivity levels of solutions journalism in the people who have been trained on this and are aware of this. At the routines level, we found that solutions reporting is just like normal reporting. We would ask people about their process of reporting a solution story, and it was the exact same. You fact check, you seek out multiple sources, it's very rigorous, it's all the same routines, but the biggest change came in the planning process. So the habit of thought when you're conceiving a story, when you're thinking about who to talk to, you're thinking about how to shape this coverage, that's where it all changed. And there was one woman we spoke to, her biggest thing was she did a huge story map before she did a solution story. And she wouldn't do this with any of her other stories, but she would get there and she would map out all the different facets of what's being done, see how they're connected, and really shape her coverage that way to get herself in that mindset of looking for the solutions. Instead of going in there trying to reveal the problem or report on the problem, she was actively changing her habits of thought in how she approached that story. And then finally, we wanted to know, well, what helps this happen and what hurts this from happening? And it all came down to management. I'm sure, again, that's no surprise. If the editor doesn't really believe in a solutions-oriented approach, it was really hard for the staff reporter to get out there and pitch a story. Freelance reporters especially would identify the publications that were solutions-friendly so that they could get in there and pitch to them because they knew that they would accept those stories. But at the same time, management was what was helping it happen. So the newspapers that were adopting this method of reporting that said, okay, let's try and do some solutions-focused journalism in our coverage. Let's incorporate that into our coverage. They would send reporters to other communities. One of the things you can do is, if your community is facing a social problem, you look at a comparable community that has done something about it or is trying to do something about it, and you send your reporter there to learn about that and then come back and report on it and say, hey, this city is doing this, here's where it's working, here's where it might not be working, and here's how maybe it could work for our community. Well, that takes resources, and so having the support from management to go out there and do that was very, very crucial for these journalists. So, in summary, we found a lot of what the definitions of solutions journalism reflected in the journalists themselves. We were excited to kind of see where it was placed within the whole realm of journalism because we weren't sure where that kind of lands in the field. Again, there's some more findings in there that I'd love for y'all to check out, and I would love to talk with y'all about any of it if you have any questions. So thank you.